You are listening to the Mastering Business Basics podcast, where we discuss how to build a solid foundation under your small business to improve your chances of success. And now, here is your host, Roger Pearson.
Welcome to this week's episode. Last week, we talked about the need for you to find your why. And if you didn't listen to the introduction episode, I do suggest you spend a few minutes with it since it's basically all you do in the future. Today, I want to discuss the necessity of examining your life experiences to determine how you choose the right type of business for you. I mean, after all, building a business is a huge undertaking, so it only makes sense to do something that you enjoy. And most of us, as we go through life, realize what we like to do and what we don't like to do. It's a common reaction to our journey. It's one of the things that steers us in our quest to have a good life. But have you ever really sat down and looked at all of those feelings to see how you could use that knowledge to determine exactly what business you should be in? I've always been amazed when I see teenagers who know exactly what they want to do for the rest of their lives and then go on to accomplish it. That's probably the rare exception. There are those that go into the family business. There's others that find a job based on their knowledge, background, and are happy being a well-paid cog in the wheel. And there's a great swath of the population that's willing to take any job just to have enough money to pay the rent and food bill. But if you're listening to this podcast, then you are probably one of those people who wants to create their own path and either succeed or fail according to your own principles. That's my mission, to help you in your quest. When I look back over my life, there are two overriding things that I seem to really enjoy doing: being an educator and anything creative. But for the first time, I have laid out a path that merges these two things together. If I'd realized this 40 years ago, well, who knows where I would be now. But let me take you on some examples of my journey, and maybe it will help you realize how to pull things together for yourself. I mean, I've always had a creative streak, not like an artist or a sculptor. I couldn't draw anything for the life of me. But of taking ideas and then finding a way to build them. I still remember when I was 5 or 6 years old, I would take these small individual boxes that cereal came in and built model trains out of them. I was always taking things I found and building something with them. When I was a senior in high school, I joined a club called Future Teachers of America. Well, because at that time I had planned to go into education. I was named the club's historian, and it was my job to create a scrapbook that included all the activities of the club over the course of the school year. Well, I probably went a little bit overboard because I found some scraps of wood and vinyl, and I created a vinyl cover on the book with stained wooden letters on the front, And the cool thing was, at the state convention, all of the scrapbooks were presented for all the various state club historians. And I won the traveling trophy that year for best scrapbook. They couldn't believe what I did. And I got to bring home the traveling trophy and put it into the trophy case for a year. It had been the first time that school had ever won anything like that. That was kind of cool. But I had no idea what that achievement meant in the larger context of my life to come. I think that's probably true of most people at that stage of life. And as I mentioned last week, I spent 4 years working at a supermarket in the Midwest. And while I worked up to a third shift manager, it was really the department that I was in charge of that I enjoyed, the displays. I mean, in the late 70s, they didn't have these narrow little end caps that you see in the stores today. I mean, I had a table at the end that was about 3 foot by 3 foot to build displays on. And I could do 3D displays that were cool. And I really, really enjoyed that. And then they let me into the produce department. And well, I had to, of course, make that one pretty too. If I'd stayed with that company, I'm sure I would have ended up managing my own store and had a nice pension to retire on. But where is the challenge in that? I think that needing a challenge is probably one of the traits that all people that want to start a small business or manage a small business have. I mean, when you go to work for a mega corporation, it's usually exciting at first, but to keep it exciting, you have to keep climbing the ladder to find it. And the problem is that the higher you climb, the less freedom you have until you're trapped into only working for that pension at the end. Yeah, it's like a trap. And there were many other creative ways I've gone through life doing. While in the restaurant and nightclub era, I actually designed two different restaurants, which would have been, I think, pretty amazing. One was a two-story Italian pizza and pasta restaurant built in an old brick building that would have had a full pipe organ in it for entertainment. I still won't give away my secret for making awesome pizza dough. The other was a combination restaurant and nightclub with the kitchen in the middle serving both sides. The whole thing was themed on Tolkien's Middle Earth. I mean, I did the design for both in detail, but I had no idea how to attract investors or raise capital for such a venture. There was no internet where you could learn how to do just about anything back in the 70s and 80s. No place where you could learn how to structure a business properly. And that's still a problem today, which is why I do what I do now. Then there was a time I tried to break into the interior design world, but found that pretty cutthroat. I tried designing websites for small businesses, but found I didn't enjoy the business part of it. The list probably goes on, and I've forgotten some of the things I've tried to make a business out of. But I didn't have a why, like I discussed last week, or a mission to hang my hat on. Like so many people, I was just reacting to what came my way. Perhaps you find yourself going through life like that at the moment. What I'm attempting to achieve this week is to help you look back at all that you've done so far in life and see a pattern of traits that you want to keep going forward to determine what business would be right for you. That doesn't mean it won't change throughout your life. It means that you just need to periodically take a look back at what you've achieved so far and see if you're still on track. After all, life is really just a series of adjustments. But back to our analysis. You have to be careful because not only what you like to do should be included in your decision on what your business should look like. For example, I love to fix things. When something around the house breaks, I'm one of those people that'll dismantle it to see how it works and see if I can fix it. Most people just throw it away and go buy a new one. Well, that's a lot harder to do today with all the miniaturization and the circuit boards running things. People aren't making things that last anymore. We seem to be in an era of planned obsolescence, which has ruined a lot of my fun. So in the past, I have thought that if I were to start over, I'd love to be a mechanical engineer. I think it would be fascinating to design those machines and fix the ones that weren't working just right. I could have gone back to college and instead of an education majored in mechanical engineering, I suppose. I could have gotten a job with an engineering firm and probably lived a pretty good life. But that's becoming another cog in the wheel. And that's just not me. Being a little older and wiser, I see now that it would probably not have worked out because such a path didn't include teaching or entrepreneurship. It would have left me with something wanting inside of myself. Without realizing it, I brought this love of fixing things into the task of managing restaurants. I worked a lot of different restaurant jobs, but there were a couple that really point this out, I think. I always seemed to gravitate towards restaurants that were in trouble and needed someone to come in and bail them out. The reason I left the supermarket job was actually because somebody asked me if I'd like to take over management of a Mexican fast food restaurant. The owner's son had been managing it and had run it into the ground, and he needed someone who knew the restaurant business to come save his investment. So I said yes. I love a challenge after all, and I love to fix things. And I did. So much so that the company that sold the franchises offered me a job going around to the other restaurants that were having problems and help restructure them. I turned them down. They wanted me to put thousands of miles on my own car and not really pay very well for being on the road all the time. It was one of those things where you wonder where your life would have gone if you'd said yes. Then there was a steakhouse that was in trouble. 2 months after I took it over, the silent partner came in to eat with his entire extended family. After dinner, he called me over and said to me, I'll never forget this. I thought that only Jesus could perform miracles, but you've done one with this restaurant. That was probably the highlight of my 10 years of off and on in the restaurant business. Here is the problem that I'm applying after being a fixer in the business world. Once you have something fixed and running smoothly, the day-to-day operations become absolutely boring. So you're always looking for that next challenge, that next thing to fix. And it took me a long time to learn this. So my fixing is now relegated to my DIY projects around the house. What I'm trying to get at here is just because you really enjoy doing or are passionate about something doesn't necessarily mean it belongs in your business plan unless it is part of the overall long-term picture. I mentioned at the beginning of this episode that my other passion is teaching, and I have several opportunities to do that throughout my journey through the corporate world. I'm not talking about hiring somebody and teaching them how to do a task. I'm referring to the type of teaching that gives people the knowledge they can use to change their lives for the better. Most of what I've talked about in this episode, I really didn't understand till I took a fork in the road 23 years ago and began doing tax returns for small business people. I found that to do the best job for my clients, I had to learn all about the legal formats that you can form a business in. I had to learn the tax implications of the business decisions that were made. I had to learn the proper way to organize the paperwork involved to make sure that you're not leaving profits on the table. And I had to learn how each of my clients' businesses run. So I've had to learn the painting business, the landscaping business, and so many more. At some point in the last decade, I decided I wanted to get this information out to a larger audience. Not in a technical sense, but in everyday language that anybody could understand. I first built a website that had a huge amount of articles and classes that would really have helped people. The problem was when something is free, people perceive it has no value, and it got no traction, so I took it down. As I mentioned last week, I believe that things solidified when I learned about the 3 ways that people learn, which is reading, listening, and watching, which is how I have restructured things for myself. Writing books, creating a podcast, videotaping an online course. This works because it incorporates 2 major things I love to do, teaching people and creating things. It also satisfies my mission of improving the lives of others and making the world a little better place to live. Last week, I talked about the need for your why. This week, I talked about the need to examine yourself. You may even find that if you already own a small business, it doesn't really fulfill what you really would like to do. So next week, I plan to delve into how to use this information to create a business and the steps you need to take to hit the ground running. Coming up in the future, I'll be discussing the various types of businesses, changes in tax laws you need to know, and a whole lot more. I've even got some guests coming up that hopefully will teach you a thing or two. If you'd like to take a look at my book, you'll find the link in the show notes. Until next week.
You have been listening to the Mastering Business Basics podcast with your host, Roger Pearson. For more information about all of the business education options that are available, we invite you to visit seagulltechnologies.com and continue your journey.